Hey, welcome back, everyone. So, we're going to be having a special episode today. Actually, special episodes all week. And because these are such special episodes, YouTube will probably ban us for talking about them. So, we have a special thing we're doing. We're actually opening up the channel on Epic TV. So, you don't need a subscription to watch this week. You don't need to sign in or anything like that. We're going to be exposing some pretty big things around January 6th. One of the big things today is we're inviting on one of the lawyers representing one of the Oath Keepers defendants. He just filed a lawsuit. We're going to get the exclusive, and he's identified a large number of these suspicious actors who are tied to some very strange organization. We cannot talk about this on YouTube, so we will be jumping over to Epic TV. I'll go over some other stuff first, but we will be jumping over exclusively to Epic TV. If you're on YouTube, any other channel, we're giving you open access. You can come watch it. Don't need to sign in. Nothing like that. We want to get this out. I'm also going to be we also have an interview with Marjorie Taylor Greene, representative, also about J6 and some other policies. So stick around for that. And yeah, some big stuff going on, folks. I want to start by talking about the economy, though, because, well, there's a big argument over whether or not we're in a recession. After this, we'll go into some of the exclusive content. But one of the big things right now, of course, is basically they're trying to change the definition of a recession and claim by doing so that we're not in a recession in the United States. People are kind of pushing back against the Biden administration right now because normally the way you would define a recession is like 2 quarters of, dropping GDP essentially. I want to go over a bit of what's happening with this. So first of all, Epic Times has a story. Yellen denies U.S. economy is in a recession despite recessionary GDP numbers. It says after the economy met the rule of thumb definition for a recession by recording negative growth for 2 quarters in a row, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen doubled down on the Biden administration's view that America's economy has not in fact fallen into a recession. Yellen told a July 20th press conference that the most economists and most Americans. Yeah, who are the most economists and who are the most Americans? They tend to do this kind of straw man type analysis. Americans agree that you should vote for me, that kind of thought. But she says most economists and most Americans define a recession as a, quote, broad-based weakening of the U.S. economy. It's never been defined like this. This is not how most economists nor most Americans would define it, even Bill Clinton himself. But she's saying again, broad-based weakening of the U.S. economy that includes businesses shuttering in significant numbers and mass layoffs. She said that is not what we're seeing right now when you look at the economy. Job creation is continuing. Household finances remain strong. Consumers are spending and businesses are growing. Her remarks came on the same day that the Bureau of Economic Analysis released data showing that real U.S. GDP fell by an annualized 0.9% in the second quarter after contracting 1.6% in the first quarter. 2 back-to-back negative GDP prints are a common practical definition for a recession, according to numerous economists, and that's normally how it was defined. Formally, if you want to talk about like the formal definition of a recession, technically, you have to have the National Bureau of Economic Research, the economists with that, make the definition. They have to declare it, basically. And they use a pretty broad definition on that, which does include employment, but includes a lot of other factors as well. Yellen said, as one example, in the last 3 months, our economy has created 1.1 million jobs. Yeah, those created by, like, laying off members of the military or firing pilots, I wonder. It continues, though. In 3 months, beginning each modern recession outside of the pandemic, our economy lost 240,000 jobs on average. One metric Yellen mentioned includes consumer spending continuing to rise in the second quarter and industrial output showing strong average growth over the first half of the year compared to sharp average declines during the recession. I won't go into all of this, but further in, actually, our sister media entity, they spoke with Vance Ginn, chief economist of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. He told them that basically it's a bunch of nonsense. He says, well, officially, this board, the NIBER, that can declare recessions, again, they're not calling it that right now, but it usually has, a rule of thumb with this. He said, I think this is definitely recession that we're in now from these bad politics. And he blamed progressive policies coming out of the White House, Democrat-controlled House, and the Federal Reserve, which is, of course, not only printing more money, but also raising interest rates. Jen also objected to Yellen's touting labor market strength as evidence of that the U.S. economy has not fallen into recession. He said the labor market is a lagging indicator in the overall economy. In other words, so that's going to be the big argument a lot of you are going to be hearing about whether or not we're in a recession. The big argument that you're going to be dealing with and hearing all over the place is we're not in a recession. We're not in a recession because the job market is good. People are hiring. Normal definition of a recession would be 2 consecutive quarters of GDP decline. That meaning, by definition, we are in a recession. But as Jin is noting here, he said the labor market is a lagging indicator of the overall economy, meaning that we're probably going to watch the labor market contract, in other words. And keep in mind, too, that one of the ways they're creating job openings is by doing mass layoffs and firings. Because, for example, in the military, in a lot of different fields, medical, city worker, government, if you, for example, refused to get the vaccine, you lost your job. And that's one way to create job openings is by firing people for not doing something you're mandating. So, there's a lot of factors tying into this which would skew the numbers. But again, the labor market contracting would normally be something that happens, after more than 2 quarters, meaning that they're trying to use that definition as the indicator, really going against historical precedent, is very strange, actually. It's frankly just misleading. And Jin also added that business layoff workers as a last resort, and that the job market is typically one of the last indicators to roll over. So maybe they don't want to declare a recession until pretty much we're too deep into it to realize what we're in. And also, you can also flood a country with millions of illegal aliens to create employment statistics, right? Now, the other big thing is, too, one of the strange factors we're again seeing with this is something that I've been talking about a lot, as you might remember. Whether it's oil, whether it's jobs, whether it's, pretty much every factor, I'd say, of the crumbling economy and crumbling society. The Biden administration keeps referring to this as a great transition. Biden himself called what we're going through with the rising oil prices part of an extraordinary transition. And I found it very interesting now that the Biden administration on the economy and really falling by definition into a recession, they're calling this a transition. And so it's interesting they keep using that keyword, transition, raising, of course, one of the big questions of, what are we transitioning into? Zero Hedge had this story. It says Bill Clinton sets a record straight on definition of recession. Basically, in 2000, Bill Clinton declared that a recession is 2 quarters in a row of negative growth, and people are just pointing to that and saying, this is how it was always defined and trying to redefine it now. But what I found interesting in the story was not that so much. There's a quote here. This is from Jean-Pierre denying claims that the U.S. is in a recession and says that we are in a transition. We are in a transition, not a recession, they're saying. And Janet Yellen, again, Treasury Secretary, also said the same thing. And she said this. She said, this is not an economy that's in recession, before parroting the transition narrative. She said, this is not an economy that's in recession. This is Janet Yellen. We're in a period of transition in which growth is slowing, and that's necessary and appropriate. Let me see if I can show you this, actually. I'll pull that up.
Let me just start with this. Many businesses seem to be preparing for a recession. Should all Americans at home be preparing for for a recession that many people think now is likely?
Well, look, the economy is slowing down. Last year, it grew very rapidly at about 5.5%. And that succeeded in putting people back to work who had lost their jobs during the pandemic. The labor market is now extremely strong. Even just during the last 3 months, net job gains averaged 375,000. This is not an economy that's in recession, but we're in a period of transition in which growth is slowing, and that's necessary and appropriate.
Let me just start.
It's necessary, folks, and appropriate. It's necessary that growth is slowing, and it's appropriate. Why is it appropriate to slow growth? What are we transitioning to? Why is this a necessary step to achieve whatever they're transitioning to? It's this ongoing type of language, frankly, that is raising a lot of red flags, or I think should frankly raise a whole lot more red flags, because it raises the question again of something I've covered in other episodes, talking about gas and so on, that they keep saying similar things, that they're transitioning us to something. What are they transitioning us to? Why is it necessary to basically destroy the economy, to make people pay so much more at the pump? Why is it necessary to do that? And why do they feel it's appropriate to take those, what appear to be intentional steps, to cause people so much harm, to lead to whatever they're transitioning to? You know, the language they're using, I think, is frankly a big red flag, and I think really should be raising a lot more questions over exactly what they're up to with this. That being said, on the note of recession, on the note of decline, I read some other articles, and it's interesting to note that historically, anytime America's gone into quote-unquote recession or depression or panic or whatever else, typically you do find the politicians trying to change the language. So what we're watching right now is not technically unusual. I've read some articles, for example, pointing out that these used to be called depressions, but of course, when they first started using the term recession, I believe under Hoover, although I could be wrong, I'm pretty sure it's under Hoover, they didn't want to call it a depression, and so they came up with the word recession. These used to be called depressions, and that of course brings people back to the memories of the Great Depression in the 1930s, when again they didn't want to call it a panic, because they used to be called panics. And so rather than call it a panic, they called it a depression. So you see what I'm saying? It used to be called panic, then they changed the word to depression, then they changed the word to recession, and now apparently they're calling it a transition or something else. It's just common political manipulation of language going against basic reasoning, frankly, in terms of, don't trust your lying eyes type narratives. The important part, again, though, is that they're saying the job market is the indicator that we're not in a recession. As we have mentioned, that the job market is the last thing to be impacted by such things. And so prepare accordingly, because every indicator suggests we're heading towards that. And when they finally do declare a recession, once the job markets get impacted, that's when it really is going to hit home for a lot of us, frankly. Now, at the same time, Trump is warning about this. Trump is saying that not only are we basically in a recession, he says something worse than recession is coming. And Trump says this. He says, where we're going now could be a very bad place. This was at a rally in Arizona last week. He said, we got to get this act in order. We got to get this country going, or we're going to have a serious problem. And he says, not recession. Recession is a nice word. We're going to have a much bigger problem than recession. We'll have a depression. The suggestion being that, again, previously the word recession was come up as an alternative to depression, because technically the economic situation wasn't as bad as the Great Depression. What Trump is suggesting is that the level of crisis we're facing is more on par with that of the Great Depression in the 1930s. That's what he's suggesting by saying that. And Trump also took aim at President Joe Biden's handling of the economy and blamed Biden for soaring inflation. He said Biden created the worst inflation in 47 years. We're at 9.1%. 9.1% inflation, folks. But the actual number is much, much higher than that, according to Trump. He also said that persistently high inflation combined with an economic slowdown has put the country on the verge of a devastating spell of stagflation. And keep in mind, people, of course, get on Trump for, basically calling people names and using strong language. He's a business guy. So, I mean, this technically is his wheelhouse, talking about these types of issues. Technically, this, in terms of profession, this is his wheelhouse. He's not an economist, but someone who knows business and knows how these things affect business would typically have more of an insight into this than just a politician. And he says, and again, stagflation is a combination of accelerating prices and slowing economic growth, which is what we're seeing, which could lead to something much worse than just a recession. So imagine that not only are you seeing the economy become worse, there's less money in circulation, but you're also having inflation where it's more difficult to buy the things that are becoming harder and harder to buy. Rather than prices going down, prices go up. That is, I mean, stagflation is worse in a lot of ways than even a normal depression where prices actually might fall and things might become more affordable as things continue to kind of crumble. Trump said that inflation is going higher all the time. And again, part of that is because of the Federal Reserve, which the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, apparently had a big program to infiltrate, we just found out, has continually been printing money. And as you continually print money and our government officials continue spending money by the billions with a B, trillions with a T, these bailout packages and so on, you're going to make it continually worse, as we've been seeing. And this is just my personal assumption on this. Then we'll jump into our interview. But my personal assumption with a lot of this is that if they were to declare that we're in a recession, if the Biden administration were to come out and say we are in a recession, they would not be able to be spending billions upon billions of dollars in all these random programs. They would not be passing multi-trillion-dollar spending packages. They would have to start rolling things back. And if they begin having to roll things back, right? If they start having to roll things back, that affects, of course, their broader agendas. And so they're regarding this as a transition, a necessary transition, something that's appropriate. Because while they are harming the economy through bad spending and massive spending and just bad policy, locking down cities, firing people from their jobs, maintaining policies that are not sustainable, while they're doing that, right? They're causing harm, they're causing a recession, they're making things worse. But if they were to declare that they have actually caused harm, they would not be able to continue on that agenda. They would have to roll it back. They'd have to roll back some of those policies. My personal analysis on this is that is why they're not declaring this a recession, because doing so would actually impact their agenda. It would mean they have to roll it back. And I assume that's why Yellen is saying we're part of a transition and it's necessary and appropriate. My personal analysis on this. All right, folks, that said, we're going to jump over exclusively to Epic TV. Again, this is a special episode. We're opening up Epic TV for everyone today. No paywall, no subscription, no nothing, because what we have is something very, very important. We have an individual, one of the lawyers representing one of the Oath Keepers defendants, who just filed a lawsuit today, just filed his case today. And he's identified several dozen of these suspicious actors. And not only did he identify these suspicious actors, but he identified that they're with a very strange organization, which is, I think, a bombshell finding, really something pretty massive. Briefly as well, we're going to be having special episodes today, tomorrow, and the next day. So I'm going to be having a lot of exclusive content about January 6th, stuff that's never been heard before, today, tomorrow, and on Wednesday. And that said, let's jump over to Epic TV for our special guest. This is Brad Geyer. He's managing partner of formerfeds.com. He's also the attorney for Kenneth Harrelson, one of the January 6th defendants, and a member of the Oath Keepers. And again, he just filed a major case with some major findings. And right now is the world exclusive on this. And so let's jump over to Epic TV for this. Again, totally open. Come over now. It's in the link below this, and it's in the link in the description. Come join us now. We're going to talk about this. YouTube will delete our video if we talk about it. All right. We jumped over. We all good? Oh, those curious as well. I have a matcha today. So let me show you real quick a trailer before we jump. This is Sheriff Mack, and he's launched a movement to investigate the 2,000 Mules findings on election fraud. Let me show you this first, then we'll jump over.
Trump really blew the horn about this, no question about it. But he's not the only victim, and this isn't the first time it's happened.
You were the guys who sued the Clintons, and now you're going after election fraud.
I'm the first sheriff in American history to start a lawsuit against the federal government, and as you mentioned, the Clintons no less, in the only time in history that a sheriff beat the federal government at the U.S. Supreme Court. And we're still moving and we're still working. And this was the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in the history of our country, and it was done by sheriffs.
And now this group of sheriffs, the ones that stood up for all these things, you're going after election fraud.
This is the greatest crime committed against the American people in the history of our country. This is a coup against the stewardship that we have as the people to choose our own representatives, to make this a constitutional republic.
All right, folks. Sorry, my producers helped me with the sound. So, real quick as well, actually, after we released our documentary, The Real Story of January 6th, and yes, we have merchandise finally. After we released our documentary, actually Twitter banned us. Twitter blocked all content of Epoch Times on their platform. All of our articles, everything was blocked. There was a pretty big outcry. We got a lot of support on it, and Twitter actually reversed that block. But it is emphasizing, again, what we've been saying is that a lot of people don't want to talk about January 6th. And frankly, the reason is that Twitter will block you for it. We've had many videos deleted, and we've even gotten strikes, for example, on YouTube for it. There is a movement right now to try to prevent this evidence from coming forward. And I believe the reason there's a movement to prevent this evidence from coming forward is because the evidence is damning against the people who are trying to frame the narrative that January 6th was some kind of insurrection by Trump supporters, when it absolutely was not. And frankly, that there were many, many laws broken on the other side, which our documentary, The Real Story January 6th, shows. So if you haven't seen our documentary yet, please go watch it. Go watch the documentary. Please send it to your friends and family. Help us get the word out on it. There is a concerted effort, I believe, based on the censorship we've seen, to try to prevent the world from seeing this documentary. So go watch it. Get the word out for us. Again, help tell people about it and help get this out there, because they don't want you to see it, frankly. All right, that said, folks, let's bring on our guest. Again, this is Brad Geyer. He's managing partner of formerfeds.com. He's also a January 6th attorney for Kenneth Harrelson, one of the Oath Keeper defendants, and he just filed something pretty major. Oh, one sec. How you doing? Hey, Brad, you hear me?
Josh?
Hey, real pleasure having you on. Thanks for taking the time for this.
Thank you, sir.
So I understand you just